Eleanor Hayes sat in her small, dimly lit room at Maplewood Nursing Home, a place that had become her reluctant sanctuary. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the muted sounds of distant conversations, laughter, and the occasional clatter of wheels on linoleum. She gazed out the window, her heart heavy as she watched the world outside continue without her. Sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air, but the warmth of the sun did little to reach the chill that had settled in her spirit. The walls of her room were adorned with an eclectic collection of photographs, each telling a story of better times. There was a picture of a young Eleanor at her wedding, her smile radiant as she stood beside her husband, a man whose laughter still echoed in her memories. Another frame captured her children, Sarah and James, on a summer day when their joy was palpable, their laughter ringing like music in her ears. They were so small then, so innocent, their faces smeared with chocolate ice cream, completely unaware of the complexities that lay ahead. As Eleanor's gaze drifted over these snapshots, she felt an ache in her chest, a longing for a time when love felt unconditional and family was a fortress, not a battleground. The sound of wheels rolling on the tile floor broke her reverie. Eleanor turned her head just in time to see Sarah and James entering her room, their expressions a mix of feigned cheerfulness and underlying impatience. They were dressed in their work clothes, crisp and neat, but the tension in their bodies suggested they were not there to visit. Instead, they were there to drop her off, a necessary chore before they returned to their busy lives. "Hi, Mom," Sarah exclaimed, her voice bright but lacking the warmth it once held. She stepped forward to give Eleanor a quick hug, her movements more mechanical than affectionate. James followed suit, his embrace brief and distracted, as if he were merely fulfilling a familial duty. "Hello, my darlings," Eleanor replied, forcing a smile to mask the hurt that clawed at her insides. She could see it in their eyes, the flicker of guilt that quickly morphed into indifference. They were only here because they had to be, and she could feel the weight of unspoken words hanging heavily between them. "We just wanted to drop off your things," Sarah said, gesturing to a bag that James had placed on the floor. "You know, some clothes and a few books. We'll be back to check on you soon." "Will you?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She searched their faces for the sincerity she craved, but found only the gloss of superficiality. "When do you think that will be?" "Soon, Mum. We promise," James replied, though his eyes darted to the clock on the wall, clearly signaling his desire to leave. "You know how busy we both are right now." Eleanor nodded, but inside a storm raged. How could they not see the fracture in their family? How could they not understand the depth of her loneliness? She watched them with a mixture of love and despair as they began to gather their things, the conversation feeling like an echo of a life that had once been vibrant but was now reduced to polite exchanges. "Maybe I could join you for dinner one night," Eleanor ventured, her heart pounding in her chest, desperate for connection. "I'd love to see you both outside of this place." James exchanged a quick glance with Sarah before responding, "We'll see, Mom. We'll see." The vagueness of his answer hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating her hopes. "Take care, Mom. We love you," Sarah said, stepping back toward the door, her voice lacking the conviction of her words. Eleanor's heart sank as she realized how empty those words felt, how they had become just another part of the ritual of leaving. "Love you too," Eleanor murmured, her voice trembling as she fought back tears. She watched as they turned to leave, their backs to her, oblivious to the way her heart cracked just a little bit more with each step they took. The door clicked shut, and silence enveloped her once again. Eleanor felt as if she was watching a train pull away from the station, the whistle blowing, the distance growing, and she was left alone, stranded on the platform of her own life. Days turned into weeks, the calendar pages flipping lazily in the corner of her room, each one a reminder of her solitude. The once vibrant photographs that had adorned her walls began to feel like ghosts, haunting her with memories that had started to fade. She struggled daily with the weight of loneliness that pressed down upon her, wrapping around her heart like an iron shackle. Amidst this suffocating isolation, a glimmer of light shone through the darkness. Lily, a kind nurse with an infectious smile, began to take a special interest in Eleanor. Lily had a way of listening, truly listening, that made Eleanor feel seen. Their conversations became a lifeline, a connection that pulled Eleanor from the depths of her despair. "Tell me about your children," Lily prompted one afternoon as she adjusted Eleanor's pillow, her gentle hands tenderly smoothing the fabric. "What were they like when they were young?" Eleanor's eyes brightened at the question, the warmth of nostalgia flooding her heart. "Oh, Sarah was such a dreamer," she began, her voice steadying as she recalled the past. "Always wanted to be an artist. She would spend hours drawing and painting, creating worlds that only she could see. And James, he was my little adventurer, always climbing trees, getting into trouble. I could never keep him still." "Sounds like you had a lively household," Lily smiled, settling into the chair beside Eleanor's bed. "It was," Eleanor agreed, her thoughts drifting back to the laughter that had once filled their home. "We had our struggles, of course, but there was love. So much love." Her voice cracked slightly, revealing the fissures in her heart. But somewhere along the way, it all changed. Lily leaned in closer, her eyes filled with compassion. "What do you mean?" Eleanor sighed, the weight of her memories pressing heavily upon her. I think I lost them somewhere. They grew up, and I became just a shadow in their lives. I don't understand how it happened." She paused, her gaze drifting to the window as she fought to contain her emotions. "I thought I was giving them everything, but perhaps I didn't give them enough of me." "You did your best, Eleanor," Lily reassured her softly. "And it's never too late to share your stories. They might need to hear them." Eleanor offered a weak smile, her heart swelling with gratitude for this young woman who saw her, who cared. "Perhaps you're right. Perhaps if I share more, they will remember." As the days passed, Eleanor found herself opening up to Lily, sharing tales of her youth, of dreams long forgotten, and the love she had poured into her children. With each story, she felt a little lighter, a little more connected to the vibrant woman she once was. Lily encouraged her to share her memories with the other residents, suggesting that perhaps they too had stories that needed to be told. One afternoon, as Eleanor sat in the common room, she watched the other residents, some lost in their own worlds, others engaged in quiet conversations. She felt a stirring within her, a desire to bridge the gap that had formed between her and the life she once knew. Maybe, just maybe, if she shared her past, it would resonate with them, and they would understand that they were not alone in their struggles. "Would you like to share a story with us, Eleanor?" one of the residents asked, her voice shaky yet eager. Eleanor glanced around the room, seeing faces that mirrored her own pain and longing. Taking a deep breath, she nodded, her heart racing. "Yes, I would like that." And as she began to speak, the words flowed like a river, washing away the dust of abandonment and bringing forth a vibrant tapestry of her life, her children, and the love that once filled her home. Eleanor Hayes stared out of the window of her nursing home room, the pale light of the afternoon sun filtering through the sheer curtains and casting soft shadows on the wall. The vibrant garden below, bursting with colors of blooming flowers, felt like a distant world, one she had long been a part of, but now only observed from the confines of her small space. The photographs adorning the walls, depicting moments of joy and laughter, were bittersweet reminders of a life filled with love and the children she had raised. Yet, the silence enveloping her was deafening. Meanwhile, across town in a bustling cafe, Sarah and James sat across from each other, their steaming cups of coffee forgotten as they delved into a conversation that felt more like a business meeting than a familial reunion. A newspaper lay open before them, its headlines filled with the mundane happenings of the world, but their focus remained on a much more pressing matter. "Now, have you thought about what we're going to do when we read the will?" Sarah asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp with anticipation. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, the clinking of the spoon against the ceramic cup echoing the tension in the air. James leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defensively. "Honestly, I'm not sure it matters. It's not like we can change what she's leaving behind. We just need to make sure we get what's ours." His voice carried a hint of resentment, as if the weight of their family's past was a burden too heavy to bear. "Right," Sarah replied, her fingers tapping lightly on the table. "But what if she surprises us? You know how she can be, full of unexpected twists. We should be prepared for anything. This could be our chance to finally get a handle on her estate." James nodded, though uneasily. "I just wish she'd been more present, like actually there for us, when we needed her. Instead, she left us to fend for ourselves, and now we're supposed to act like everything's fine just because she's dying. It's infuriating." His words hung in the air like a storm cloud, casting a shadow over their conversation. Sarah shifted in her seat, her expression betraying a mix of frustration and guilt. I know, but let's not forget that she's still our mother. We owe her that much, even if she didn't always show it." "Do we?" James shot back, his voice rising slightly. "Because it sure doesn't feel like she thought about us when she made her plans. I mean, look at us now." He gestured around the cafe, the bustling patrons oblivious to their turmoil. "We're sitting here, talking about her like she's just a number on a paper, rather than a person who raised us." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair in exasperation. "What do you want me to say? That we should have been better children? Because I've been feeling guilty about all of this for a long time. But it's too late for that now. We just need to focus on the will, on what's coming next." At that moment, Eleanor sat in her room, the weight of the world resting heavy on her heart. She had received a letter from her lawyer earlier in the day detailing the upcoming reading of her will. The envelope, stark and formal, lay on her lap, and she traced its edges with her fingers as she contemplated the implications of what was to come. Would her children finally care enough to show up and confront the choices they had made? Or was this just another opportunity for them to squabble over what they believed they were entitled to? "Dear Eleanor," the letter had begun, its contents a stark reminder of her mortality. It spoke of the will reading scheduled for the following week, a meeting that would bring her children back to her, if only for a fleeting moment. She felt a flutter of hope mixed with anxiety, a longing for connection battling against the fear of rejection. "Will they truly care?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the room. "Or will they come just to claim their inheritance?" The thought gnawed at her, twisting her stomach into knots. She felt as if she was standing at the precipice of a great chasm, the unknown stretching out before her, filled with both promise and trepidation. With determination, Eleanor decided she would attend the reading. This was her chance, perhaps her last, to confront her children, to express the hurt that had festered over the years from their abandonment. She envisioned the scene, her frail body in a wheelchair, rolling into the room where Sarah and James would sit, their expressions a mix of expectation and disdain. The thought both terrified and invigorated her. "Maybe this time I can make them understand," she murmured, her heart racing as she imagined the confrontation. Back at the cafe, Sarah and James continued their discussion, their focus shifting to logistics. "We should probably discuss the estate with Mr. Thompson before the reading," Sarah suggested, her voice taking on a businesslike tone. "He might give us insight into what to expect." "Yeah, that makes sense," James replied, though a hint of reluctance lingered in his tone. "But I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. Let's just see what she's left first. I don't want to get my hopes up." "I get that," Sarah said, her eyes narrowing in thought. "But if there's a way to maximize our inheritance, we need to be strategic about it. We can't let emotions cloud our judgment." "Right," James agreed reluctantly. "It's just, I never thought it would come to this. It feels wrong." "Wrong or not, it's reality. We have to think practically. That's all we can do," Sarah replied, her voice firm, masking the uncertainty that churned beneath the surface. As the day progressed, Eleanor found herself lost in memories, pondering the love she once felt from her children and the deep-seated sense of betrayal that had taken root in her heart. She thought back to their childhood, Sarah's laughter as she played dress-up, James's fierce determination to build the tallest block tower. Those moments felt like a different lifetime, a time when they were united by love and hope. Yet now, as she prepared for the impending will reading, Eleanor felt the weight of her choices pressing down upon her. She recalled the moments when she had put her career and ambitions ahead of her family, the times when she had chosen work over her children's needs. The guilt washed over her in waves. "What if I had done things differently?" she whispered to the empty room, her voice trembling. "Would they have turned out differently?" In that moment of vulnerability, Eleanor made a silent vow. Regardless of the outcome, she would speak her truth, would lay bare her heart to Sarah and James. She refused to let the opportunity slip away, even if it meant facing their anger and resentment. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the room, Eleanor took a deep breath and closed her eyes. The world outside faded away, and she imagined a future where her children could see her, really see her, not as a burden, but as a woman who had loved them fiercely. She envisioned a reconciliation, a chance to mend the broken pieces of their family. "I just want them to understand," she whispered as the shadows deepened around her. Meanwhile, Sarah and James wrapped up their meeting at the cafe, their minds racing with thoughts of the will and the impending confrontation with their mother. Unbeknownst to them, the journey ahead would challenge everything they believed about family, love, and the legacies one leaves behind. They were set on a collision course with the past, a past that would soon come rushing back to confront them in unexpected and life-altering ways. In the somber conference room of the law office, the atmosphere hung heavy with unspoken tension. The walls, painted an unassuming beige, felt as though they were closing in on Eleanor Hayes as she prepared to face her children. At the center of the room, a long mahogany table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, its polished surface reflecting the mixed emotions of the three occupants. Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, sat at one end, his expression a blend of professionalism and empathy. He flipped through the pages of Eleanor's will, glancing occasionally at the clock on the wall as if anticipating the arrival of the estranged family members. Sarah and James entered the room just moments later, their demeanor cold and calculated. Sarah, in her tailored navy suit, exuded an air of confidence that felt almost abrasive. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, and she wore a look of practiced neutrality that betrayed nothing of her inner turmoil. James, on the other hand, was more casual, his sweater vest slightly wrinkled. He took a seat beside Sarah, casting a fleeting glance at the lawyer before folding his arms defensively across his chest. "Thank you for waiting," Sarah said, her voice clipped. She moved to the center of the table, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor, as if challenging the space itself to react. "We're here now. Let's get this over with." Mr. Thompson nodded, motioning for them to take their seats. "I appreciate your promptness. We can begin as soon as Eleanor arrives." He shifted in his seat, clearing his throat in preparation for the difficult task ahead. Eleanor, seated in her wheelchair, was gently guided into the room by a nurse named Lily. The soft hum of the wheelchair's wheels against the floor echoed in the silence, drawing the attention of Sarah and James. As Eleanor entered, she felt a wave of apprehension wash over her, but she steeled herself. The frail figure of her mother, draped in a light cardigan, bore the weight of years lived and secrets kept. Her silver hair framed a face etched with the lines of joy and sorrow, a testament to a life well lived, yet marked by abandonment. "Hello, Mum." Sarah's greeting was devoid of warmth, her eyes scanning Eleanor with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. James offered a weak smile, his eyes darting between Eleanor and the lawyer as if seeking reassurance. "Hello, dear," Eleanor replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She met their gazes, feeling both vulnerable and determined. This was her moment, a chance to confront the children she had devoted her life to, only to have them turn their backs on her in her time of need. "Are we ready to begin?" Mr. Thompson asked, breaking the silence that hung in the air. Eleanor nodded, her heart racing as she prepared for the revelation of her wishes. She could sense the tension radiating from her children, each of them bracing for the financial windfall they had long anticipated. As Mr. Thompson adjusted his glasses and began reading from the will, Eleanor's mind wandered momentarily to her past. Memories flooded back, illuminating the room with the warmth of her younger years, her laughter, the birthday parties, the family vacations filled with joy. She had once been a mother who nurtured dreams for her children, only to find herself abandoned in a sterile nursing home. "To my children, Sarah and James," Mr. Thompson read aloud, his voice steady and clear. "I leave the following possessions: my jewelry, a modest savings account, and my beloved collection of books." He paused, looking up at the two siblings, whose expressions darkened with each word. "That's it?" Sarah scoffed, disbelief etched across her face. "What about the house, the investments, the money she always talked about?" Eleanor's heart sank at her daughter's reaction, but she held her ground. "I didn't want to leave you anything that would only fuel further resentment," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "It was never about money for me." Mr. Thompson continued, "Furthermore, I have established a trust to benefit the local charity and the nursing home where I have spent my final years. It is my wish to support those in need, just as I have tried to do throughout my life." A stunned silence enveloped the room, punctuated only by the rustle of paper as Mr. Thompson turned the page. Eleanor could feel the weight of her children's gaze, their unspoken words hanging heavily in the air. James shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Sarah's expression morphed from disbelief to anger. "You mean to tell me that you would rather give your money to strangers than to your own children?" Sarah spat, her voice rising in volume. "This is unbelievable, Mom. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" Eleanor's heart ached at the accusation. "You haven't done anything for me, Sarah," she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "You abandoned me when I needed you the most." James interjected, his tone more conciliatory. "Let's not do this here. We can talk about this later. Maybe there's something we're missing." He glanced at Eleanor, searching for understanding in her gaze, but Eleanor shook her head. "What is there to miss, James? You both made your choices. You chose convenience over love, and now you're angry because you're not getting what you expected." The lawyer cleared his throat again, sensing the escalating tension. "Perhaps we should proceed with the rest of the will," he suggested gently, hoping to diffuse the situation. As Mr. Thompson continued, Eleanor's thoughts drifted back to her childhood, the dreams she once had of raising a family filled with love and support. She had poured her heart into her children, nurturing them through life's storms, only to find that they had grown into adults whose priorities lay elsewhere. It was a bitter pill to swallow, and as she listened to the cold words of the will, a sense of finality washed over her. The reading continued to detail her modest possessions, each word a reminder of her choices. Eleanor felt a sense of peace, knowing that her legacy would not be measured by money, but by the values she had tried to instill in her children. She hoped that, one day, they would understand. As Mr. Thompson reached the final paragraph, he paused, looking at the siblings with a serious expression. "There is one last clause that I must read, which pertains to personal letters I have been instructed to give to each of you after the reading. They contain Eleanor's reflections and wishes for you both." Eleanor's heart raced. She had poured her soul into those letters, expressing her hopes and fears, and she was both anxious and relieved that they would finally be read aloud. This was her chance, a final opportunity to reach out to her children and perhaps mend the rift that had formed between them. "Mom, what did you write?" Sarah asked, her defiance momentarily replaced by curiosity. But Eleanor held her tongue. The letters were meant to be read in their own time, their own context. Mr. Thompson's voice broke the silence once more. "I suggest we take a moment before diving into the letters. It might be best for everyone to collect their thoughts." Eleanor nodded, her eyes scanning the room. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a heavy blanket. The outcome of this reading could change everything, and she could only hope that her children would finally see the truth she had lived with for so long. Love cannot be bought or sold, and it is never too late to seek redemption. The tension in the conference room thickened as Mr. Thompson continued reading. Eleanor felt a lump form in her throat as she observed the growing frustration on her children's faces. Sarah's jaw clenched tightly, while James shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming nervously on the polished table. The stark contrast between her children's demeanor and the love she once felt for them gnawed at her heart. "And to my beloved nursing home, Maple Grove, I bequeath my collection of art and personal items with the hope they will bring joy to the residents who reside there," Mr. Thompson announced, his voice steady yet somber. A low murmur of disbelief escaped from Sarah's lips. "Are you serious?" she whispered harshly to James, her eyes narrowing. "Did she really just leave her things to the home?" James ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his body language. "This is insane," he muttered, casting a furtive glance at Eleanor, who watched them with a mix of sadness and resolve. She wanted to scream, to shake them awake from their greed-fueled haze, but the words clung to her throat, trapped by a lifetime of disappointments. "Perhaps it's a reminder of where her priorities lay," James said, his voice laced with bitterness. "She never cared about us, did she?" Eleanor's heart ached at his words. She had given them everything she could: love, support, and a home filled with laughter. How could they think she had prioritized anything over them? As if sensing her pain, Lily's face flashed in her mind, the nurse who had become a lifeline in her loneliness. She had encouraged Eleanor to remember her worth, to embrace the memories of her happier days, and now those memories felt like shackles. As Mr. Thompson turned the page, Eleanor braced herself for the next part of the will. "And finally, I have a personal letter for each of my children, which I request they read aloud," he said, his voice steady yet carrying an undercurrent of gravity. Eleanor's heart raced. She had poured her soul into those letters, hoping to bridge the chasm that had formed over the years. Would they even be willing to listen? Her gaze flickered between Sarah and James, both now tense and alert, their previous annoyance shifting to a cautious interest. "Do we have to?" Sarah said, her tone dripping with disdain. What could she possibly want to say that matters now? Mr. Thompson looked at her, his expression unyielding. "It is her wish. You owe it to her to hear what she has to say." With a reluctant sigh, Sarah leaned forward, folding her arms defensively. "Fine. Let's get this over with." Eleanor watched as Mr. Thompson retrieved the letters from a folder, handing one to each child before placing the last one in front of her. The room held its breath, a fragile silence enveloping them as each child stared at their respective letter. "Who's going first?" James asked, his bravado faltering slightly. "Not me," Sarah replied, glaring at him. "You go." "All right," James said, rolling his eyes before breaking the seal on his letter. He unfolded the paper, his expression shifting from irritation to confusion as he began to read aloud. "James," he started, his mother's familiar handwriting flowing effortlessly from the page. "If you are reading this, it means we have reached a place where I can no longer offer you my love in person, and that saddens me more than I can express." A heavy silence enveloped the room as he continued, his voice wavering. "Life has taken us on different paths, and I have often questioned the decisions we made. But know this, I have always loved you, even in my silence. It pains me to see the distance that has grown between us. I wish for you to find peace and understanding in your heart, and I hope you can forgive me for the moments I failed you." James's voice cracked, and he paused, visibly struggling to maintain his composure. Eleanor's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. She had hoped her words would resonate with him, that perhaps he would see the love beneath her disappointment. "Mum, James stammered, glancing at Sarah, who was now staring at him with wide eyes. "I didn't think... I mean..." "Shut up and read the rest," Sarah snapped, her voice cutting through the emotional haze. With a deep breath, James pressed on. "There is a part of me that hopes you will reconsider how you view our past. The choices I made were not always right, but they were made with the intention of protecting you both in my own flawed way. I hope you find a way to forgive not just me, but also yourselves. You deserve happiness." Tears glistened in his eyes as he finished reading, and for a moment Eleanor saw a flicker of the boy she once knew, a boy who had been so full of dreams and love before the weight of the world had hardened him. "Wow," Sarah said, her voice softer now. "That was, surprising." James sighed, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Yeah, surprising is one way to put it." "Now you," Sarah said, a little more composed as she held her letter tightly. She tore it open with a mix of defiance and curiosity, as if she were bracing herself for an incoming assault. "Sarah," she read aloud, her voice trembling slightly, "I want you to know how proud I am of you, even when I have not shown it. You have always been strong-willed and determined, but I fear I may have failed to nurture that strength in a way that would benefit you." Eleanor felt her heart clench at her daughter's words, the way they echoed the pain she had carried for so long. "You always wanted to please everyone, but I see now that I may have pushed you too hard to be the perfect daughter," she continued, her voice growing steadier. "It is my deepest regret that I could not support you in the way you needed. I hope you will forgive me for my shortcomings." Eleanor could see the tension in Sarah's shoulders. She was battling emotions long buried. "You think I needed something from you?" Sarah challenged, her voice rising defensively. "You didn't even show up for most of my milestones." "Sarah," James interjected, trying to quell the brewing storm. "Just listen to her." "Why should I? She's the one who forgot about me." Sarah shot back, her eyes flashing with anger. Maybe she should have thought about how she treated us instead of writing this letter. But Eleanor's heart broke for her daughter. "I didn't forget you, Sarah," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "I was just so afraid of losing you both that I didn't know how to be the mother you needed. I loved you so fiercely, but I didn't know how to show it properly. Please, try to understand." Tears brimmed in Sarah's eyes as her defenses began to crumble. "I just wanted you to be proud of me," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted you to notice me." As the weight of Eleanor's words hung in the air, a fragile silence enveloped the room. The letters had opened a door to vulnerability, and the raw emotions coursing through them felt tangible, almost electric. "Maybe we all have things to work on," James finally said, his voice steadier now. Eleanor watched her children, their faces illuminated with unspoken thoughts, contemplating the enormity of what had just unfolded. "Let's just finish this," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion as she handed the letter to Eleanor. "You deserve to read yours too." Eleanor took a deep breath, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the letter. "Dear Eleanor," she began, her voice steady as she read the familiar strokes of her own hand. "If you are reading this, know that I have spent a lifetime reflecting on my choices, and I hope this letter will offer you clarity." She glanced up at Sarah and James, who were watching her intently, their expressions a mix of apprehension and hope. This was her moment, the moment she had longed for, a chance to reach out and mend the bonds that had frayed over time. "I want you to know that my love for you is unconditional, even in our darkest moments. You may feel abandoned, but you were never forgotten. I carried you both in my heart every day, and it pains me to think you may feel otherwise." Tears blurred Eleanor's vision as she continued, pouring her heart into the words. "I hope you can find a way to forgive me, just as I have tried to forgive myself. Life is not without its mistakes, but it is never too late to seek redemption and restore the love that once connected us." As Eleanor's voice faltered, she glanced at her children. The room, once filled with tension and resentment, now shimmered with the flickering hope of reconciliation. Each letter had peeled back the layers of hurt, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. "Mom," Sarah whispered, tears cascading down her cheeks. "I never understood." "Neither did I," James added softly. "But maybe we can start to figure it out together." In that moment, Eleanor felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, a promise that perhaps, just perhaps, the bonds of love could be restored even after years of silence and misunderstanding. Eleanor sat in her wheelchair, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a heavy fog. The conference room was silent, save for the rustling of paper as Mr. Thompson adjusted the will in front of him. Sarah and James, her children, were seated across from her, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and resentment. She could feel the tension crackling in the air, a palpable reminder of the years spent in silence, unspoken words hanging heavily between them. "Why did you abandon me?" Eleanor's voice broke the silence, fragile yet filled with a fierce determination. She had waited too long for this moment, the chance to confront them about the painful distance that had grown like a chasm between them. Sarah's eyes narrowed, her lips pursed into a thin line. "You have no idea what we went through, Mom. You always favored James. You never even noticed how I felt." James shifted in his seat, his brow furrowing in discomfort. "Can we not do this now? This isn't about us. It's about what's in that will." His attempt at mediation fell flat, the air thickening with unresolved emotions. But Eleanor pressed on, undeterred. "I didn't favor anyone. I did my best for both of you. I loved you equally, but you turned your backs on me when I needed you the most." Her voice rose, trembling with the weight of her sorrow. "I spent my last years alone, wondering why you didn't care. I thought I raised you better." Sarah's frustration boiled over. "You don't get it, do you? You were always so wrapped up in your own world. You had your friends, your clubs, your life. We were just there." She gestured wildly, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't think about how we felt. You didn't notice when I was struggling." James leaned forward, trying to calm the storm. "Let's just hear what Mom has to say. Maybe there's something we missed." But as he spoke, it was clear he was grappling with his own feelings of guilt and resentment. Eleanor felt her heart swell with a mixture of pain and longing. "I sacrificed everything for you two. I worked tirelessly to give you a good life. I wanted you to be happy, but I never expected to be left behind in a place like this." Her gaze shifted between them, searching for a glimmer of understanding. "I wanted to be a part of your lives, to see my grandchildren grow up, to share my stories. But instead, you just disappeared." "Mom, it's not that simple," James finally said, his voice softer but still laced with an edge of defensiveness. "You have no idea what it was like after Dad left. We were kids and you—" "Don't you dare use that as an excuse." Eleanor cut him off, her voice rising. "I was left alone too. I lost my partner, and I had to take care of both of you while dealing with my own grief. You think it was easy for me?" Sarah crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "You never let us see you struggle. You were always so strong, so independent. We thought you didn't need us." Eleanor felt the sting of those words. "I didn't want you to see me weak. I wanted you to grow up strong, to have everything I didn't. I wanted you to be proud of me." Her voice softened, revealing the tender heart beneath her defensive shell. "But I never meant for you to feel abandoned." As the confrontation escalated, James's frustration spilled over. "Do you even hear yourself? You're still making this about you. This is about us, about how we felt growing up. You never asked us if we were okay, never really listened." "Because you never talked." Eleanor's voice cracked, emotions threatening to spill over. "I didn't know you were hurting. I thought you were happy. I thought I was doing the right thing." Tears began to pool in Eleanor's eyes, blurring her vision as she fought to maintain her composure. "Please, remember the love we shared. Remember the times we laughed together, the moments that matter." Her voice trembled, filled with a desperate hope that they could find their way back to each other. "I don't want to leave this world feeling like I lost my family." James inhaled sharply, the tension in the room twisting like a knife. "Mom, we're not trying to hurt you, but this is about more than just your feelings. We've spent years trying to cope with our own pain, and now it's all coming out." Eleanor's heart raced, the vulnerability of the moment overwhelming her. She felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crack. "I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to protect you. I thought if I shielded you from my struggles, you would grow up with fewer burdens." Sarah shook her head, her own tears threatening to fall. "But we needed you, Mom. We needed you to be real with us. We wanted to be there for you too." Her voice softened, revealing the cracks in her anger. "Instead, we grew up feeling like we had to carry everything alone." In that moment, Eleanor felt a deep connection, a bridge forming across the chasm that had separated them for so long. She reached out, her frail hand trembling as she sought to grasp theirs. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to be the mother you needed. I was just trying to be strong." But before they could respond, Eleanor felt a wave of emotion crash over her, the culmination of years of grief and regret flooding through her. I just wanted you to love me. I wanted to feel like I mattered." Her voice broke, and she pressed a trembling hand to her chest, feeling the weight of her choices and the rift that had formed over the years. "Please don't let this be the end of us." James glanced at Sarah, their eyes locking in a moment of unspoken understanding. The anger that had once consumed them began to dissipate, replaced by a shared realization of their intertwined pain. "Mum, we're not giving up on you. We just need to work through this together." He reached out, taking her hand in his, squeezing it gently. Sarah wiped her tears away, her voice softening as she added, "We all have things to say, things we've kept buried. But maybe this is our chance to finally start healing, to be a family again." Eleanor felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Can we really do that? Can we mend what's been broken? James nodded, determination etched on his face. We have to try. We owe it to ourselves, to each other. As they sat there, hands intertwined, the air shimmered with a newfound sense of possibility. Eleanor could feel the weight of the past lifting, replaced by a fragile but powerful bond. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, she felt like maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to one another. "Let's start with the truth," Eleanor said, her voice steadier now. "Let's share everything. No more secrets." The three of them sat in silence, the moment stretching out before them, a canvas waiting to be filled with the colors of their shared history. It was a daunting task, but in that moment, they were ready to embrace the challenge together, ready to confront the shadows of the past and reclaim the love they once shared. Eleanor Hayes sat in her wheelchair, the weight of the recent confrontation lingering in the air like a thick fog. Her heart was still racing from the emotional turmoil of the will reading, where her children had torn into her past choices without remorse. She was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. The nursing home's beige walls felt even more confining now, a stark reminder of her situation, as she stared blankly at the floor, lost in thought. Suddenly her phone rang, breaking the silence that enveloped her. It was a number she didn't recognize, and for a moment she hesitated. The last thing she wanted was another reminder of her fractured family. But curiosity got the better of her. She picked up the receiver, her heart pounding anew. "Hello," she answered, her voice shaky. "Eleanor? Is that you?" The voice on the other end was filled with warmth, but there was an underlying urgency that raised the hairs on the back of her neck. "Yes. Who is this?" Eleanor asked warily. "It's Margaret O'Reilly. I know it's been years, but I need to talk to you. It's about your family." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. Margaret had been one of her closest friends in her youth, a confidant who had shared in her joys and sorrows. They had lost touch over the years, and Eleanor had always wondered where life had taken her. "Margaret, what do you mean? What's happened?" "I can't say much over the phone, but it's important. Please, can you meet me? There are things you need to know, things about your children, about their father, about your past." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. The mention of her husband, Thomas, who had passed away over a decade ago, stirred memories both sweet and bitter. "What do you mean? What about Thomas?" "Just trust me, Eleanor. I'll explain everything when we meet. Can you come to the cafe on Pine Street tomorrow at 2? "Okay," Eleanor replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be there." She hung up the phone, the weight of her friend's words pressing heavily on her chest. What could Margaret possibly tell her? The thought of uncovering more family secrets both terrified and intrigued her. Meanwhile, in the nursing home's common area, Sarah and James sat together, their expressions a mixture of frustration and confusion. They had just witnessed a raw and painful confrontation with their mother, feelings of resentment bubbling to the surface. Yet, now they were left with more questions than answers. "Did you hear that?" Sarah said, leaning closer to James. "What was that about?" James frowned, his brow furrowed in thought. "I don't know, but it sounded serious. We should find out what she's talking about. It could change everything." "Change everything?" Sarah scoffed. "What could a conversation with one of her old friends possibly change?" "Maybe more than you think," James countered. "We have to know. If there's something about our family that we don't know, we need to find out before it's too late." Sarah crossed her arms, her mind racing. "Fine, but if we're going to do this, we need to be careful. If Mom finds out we're investigating her past, she'll shut down on us again." "Agreed," James replied, a spark of determination igniting within him. "Let's follow her tomorrow. If we can't get the truth from her, we'll get it from Margaret." The following day, Eleanor arrived at the cafe, her heart racing with anticipation. She hadn't seen Margaret in years, and the thought of unearthing old memories filled her with both excitement and dread. As she entered, the scent of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods enveloped her, a comforting reminder of simpler times. She spotted Margaret sitting at a corner table, her silver hair neatly styled, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and warmth. "Eleanor!" Margaret exclaimed, rising to greet her with open arms. "It's so good to see you." Eleanor embraced her friend, feeling a rush of nostalgia. "You too, Margaret. It's been too long." They settled into their seats, and Eleanor could see the worry etched on Margaret's face. "What's going on? You said you had something important to tell me." Margaret took a deep breath, her fingers nervously tapping against her coffee cup. "Eleanor, I didn't want to bring this up over the phone, but there are things about your children that you need to know. Things that could change how you see them and yourself." Eleanor's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "Do you remember back when you and Thomas were having trouble? The financial issues, the arguments? There was a lot going on that you didn't know about." Eleanor nodded, memories flooding back. "Yes, but we worked through it. We always did." "Not entirely," Margaret said gently. "There were things Thomas kept from you. Secrets he thought would protect you, but they ultimately hurt you and the kids." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "What kind of secrets?" "Thomas had a complicated past. Before he met you, he was involved in some questionable business dealings. I didn't think much of it at the time, but after he passed away, I learned more. There are people, Eleanor, people who might come looking for your children." Eleanor's mind whirled. "Why didn't anyone tell me? Why did Thomas never say anything? My children deserve to know the truth." "Because he thought it would protect you. But the truth is, Eleanor, those shadows don't just disappear. They linger, and they can affect your children's lives in ways you can't even imagine." As the weight of Margaret's revelations settled over her, Eleanor saw a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision. Sarah and James had entered the cafe, and their eyes locked onto her instantly. They moved closer, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and caution. "What are you doing here?" Sarah demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory. Eleanor felt her heart drop. She hadn't wanted them to see her like this. I'm just catching up with an old friend," she stammered. James narrowed his eyes, suspicion etched on his face. "You're hiding something, aren't you?" Margaret glanced between Eleanor and the two siblings, sensing the tension in the air. "It's not what you think," she intervened, her voice calm yet firm. "Eleanor and I are discussing family matters." "Family matters?" Sarah repeated, disbelief evident in her tone. "What kind of family matters?" Eleanor, feeling cornered, glanced at Margaret for support. "It's complicated," she began, her voice trembling. "Margaret has some information about your father, about our past." James's expression transformed from suspicion to concern. "What about Dad?" Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "There are things about your father that I never told you, things that could change your understanding of our family." As the truth hung in the air, Eleanor noticed the shift in her children's demeanor. The anger and resentment that had colored their interactions began to fade, replaced by a fragile alliance forged in the face of uncertainty. They were no longer adversaries. They were all seeking the same truth. "What kind of things?" Sarah asked, her voice softer now. Margaret took the lead, her tone even and reassuring. "I think it's important that you all discuss this together. Eleanor deserves to share her side of the story, and you deserve to hear it." Eleanor nodded, her heart racing. "I never wanted to hide anything from you, but I thought I was protecting you. I thought it was best to leave the past buried." "But the past has a way of resurfacing," James said quietly. "We need to confront it together." As they all sat at the cafe table, the atmosphere shifted. The weight of unspoken words hung between them, but the fragile threads of connection began to weave anew. Eleanor looked at her children, her heart aching with both fear and hope. "Let's talk," she said finally, her voice steady. "Let's talk about everything. It's time you knew the truth." As they prepared to dive into the depths of their family's past, Eleanor felt a mix of fear and anticipation. Would they emerge stronger, or would the revelations shatter the fragile bonds that remained? She held on to hope, believing that perhaps, just perhaps, love could conquer even the darkest of secrets.